urgent, dramatic tone. A 17th century heavy oak ship is tossed violently in the middle of a screaming gale. Suddenly, the pitch-black water erupts. A muscular tentacle, thick as the ship's mainmast, coils over the railing and begins crushing the hull like dry kindling. Since humans first pushed boats into the surf, mariners have returned with stories of a nightmare rising from the crushing pressure of the abyss. They described an animal of impossible scale and terrifying intelligence. For generations, modern historians comfortably filed these accounts away. They concluded these stories were simply the desperate hallucinations of exhausted, salt-crazed crews staring too long into the dark water. Look closely at this navigational map. Cartographers integrated this green sea monster directly into the navigational data, placing the creature alongside depth soundings and wind currents as a functional warning to other pilots. These ancient charts suggest that for early mariners, the sea functioned as a predatory hunting ground, where a ship was as much prey as it was a vessel of trade. The earliest concrete warnings come from Norse mariners. The Vikings named the threat the Kraken, the unhealthy one. They reported seeing a gargantuan submerged back that closely resembled a shifting island. The danger peaked when the beast submerged. The sheer volume of displaced water created a roaring vortex, a cataclysmic whirlpool that dragged nearby ships down into the lightless depths of the North Sea. By 1752, the phenomenon finally met the scientific method. Bishop Erik Pontoppidan of Norway decided to approach the beast not as folklore, but as an undocumented natural hazard. He spent years interviewing independent, weather-beaten fishermen across the North Sea. Their descriptions matched with chilling precision. They all reported an animal with a mile-wide back, covered entirely in thick seaweed and sandbanks. By organizing these eyewitness testimonies, Pontoppidan moved the monster out of the realm of oral campfire stories. He categorized it as a specific, physical oceanic threat that demanded serious naval investigation. In 1782, the reports of these encounters shifted from isolated fishing boats to a premier military target, the French warship Ville de Paris. The Ville de Paris was a 110-gun titan of the waves. According to reports from the surrounding fleet, the wind died entirely during the crossing, leaving the warship sitting completely motionless on an unnervingly flat, glassy ocean under the moonlight. Massive, serpentine arms rose silently out of the dark water. Witnesses described these tentacles rising like pillars of smoke, systematically plucking sailors from the deck. The creature wrapped around the hull and dragged the massive warship and its hundreds of sailors beneath the waves. Not a single cannon shot was fired in defense. The disappearance of such a massive, well-armed vessel challenged the assumption that military force offered any protection against the ocean's biological hazards. When we look closely at these logs across centuries, a clear biological profile emerges. The massive water displacement that terrified the Vikings, combined with the surgical, serpentine strikes described by the French Navy, point to an animal adapted perfectly to deep-water ambush hunting. For hundreds of years, humanity could only guess at what lived beneath the light. It wasn't until the arrival of deep-sea submersibles and sonar that we finally acquired the technology to pierce the darkness of the abyssal plain. We assumed that charting this lightless reach of the planet would finally banish the maritime myths. Instead, we found their exact physical counterparts. Take a look at this archival photograph. This is a real giant squid specimen laid out on a tarp. Look at the people standing in the background. The sheer scale of those hooked serpentine tentacles matches the nightmare encounters logged in 18th century naval reports. The exhausted sailors clinging to rigging in the dark were never hallucinating. These massive leviathans are entirely real, breathing apex predators. Humanity just needed the technology to dive deep enough to look them in the eye.
This is a live feed from the darkest environment on Earth. A camera spotlight cuts through the black, catching a dinner plate-sized eye, a razor-sharp beak, and violent movement ripping through thick external cables. The midnight zone begins at 1,000 meters down. Here, sunlight vanishes, temperatures hover near freezing, and the pressure is heavy enough to crush a car. We have mapped less of this terrain than the surface of the moon. For decades, Marine biology relied on clinical logic to categorize the deep. Because researchers couldn't observe these depths in person, they assumed they understood them. The stories sailors told of massive, ship-breaking monsters were dismissed as myths born of isolation and fatigue. But that scientific certainty was built on a lack of data. By assuming the deep ocean followed the same rules as the surface, researchers left the possibility of an undocumented apex predator entirely unexamined. The first documented challenge to that consensus came in 1874. Passengers and crew aboard the steamer Galveston logged an account of an encounter that the science of the time could not explain. From the deck, they watched a colossal squid rise to the surface, locked in a fight with a full-grown sperm whale. Tentacles estimated at 80 feet long wrapped around the whale's body as the two animals thrashed in a spray of blood and ink. While the 1874 log is a written record, the physical evidence remains on the predators that survived. These circular scars on the flank of a modern sperm whale are the permanent results of those deep water battles. It raises a question about the limits of our knowledge. Is it possible that 19th century sailors weren't exaggerating, but were simply the only ones witnessing a biological reality we haven't yet quantified? You can dismiss an old ship's log as a tall tale, but the violent physical markings found on the ocean's largest known divers demand a real biological explanation. In 2024, autonomous technology is finally reaching the trenches where human divers cannot survive, scanning the seafloor with high-frequency acoustics. This sonar sweep from Antarctica indicates a 60-foot biological mass moving with the speed of an active predator. That measurement far exceeds any known squid species and shouldn't be possible at these depths. To see the gap in our records, look at this verified giant squid specimen. Next to the human researchers, it is a massive animal, yet it is significantly smaller than the biological mass detected by the 2024 sonar. When the research team lowered an abyss camera to investigate the area, they found distinctive sucker markings and gouges along the canyon walls. The size of these imprints suggests a creature that has never been cataloged by modern biology. The math doesn't match the textbooks. We are looking at an animal that operates far beyond the size and speed limits we previously set for life in the deep. Recently, during a routine survey of a deep-sea pipeline, a multi-million-dollar remote-operated vehicle was deployed into the trench. The ROV's live feed was suddenly enveloped by a thick, reddish-pink tentacle that lunged from the darkness and wrapped around the metal frame. Large suckers created a vacuum seal against the submersible's hull. On the surface, the team watched as the machine's internal pressure sensors began to spike. The feed flickered and went dark. The final data transmitted showed the ROV being pulled downward into a trench, where the atmospheric weight would crush its heavy metal frame to dust. The machine wasn't just incidentally damaged, it was intercepted and dragged into the abyss. Even our most advanced engineering is now being treated as a potential source of food. From the 19th century accounts of sailors to the high-definition feeds of modern drones, the descriptions of these encounters remain remarkably consistent. We use names like Colossal Squid to try and categorize the unknown, but those labels feel inadequate describing an apex predator that has dominated the deep for millennia. As we build deeper pipelines and send more machines into the dark, we do so with the confidence of conquerors. We act as if the entire ocean is a domain we have already mastered. But the reality of the Midnight Zone is a humbling one. The ocean does not belong to us. When we descend into the trenches, we are merely passing through a realm where the Kraken still reigns.